Okay, let's talk about academics. How are Korean moms different when it comes to educating their kids?
Oh,
I think
Where do we
We
start?
need a couple days for that.
I mean, again, my kids are quite young, so they're not in school yet, 5 and 3. But I found that there's a lot more comparing. So with the Korean moms that I've met, it's important that my kid is better than everyone else's kid.
Yeah.
That's sort of the rule of thumb. Although I personally think for me it would be more important for my kids to do well on their own sort of time track and, you know, be good at what they're good at. And if they're not good at something, then it's okay, I think. But there's just a lot more comparing, I think.
Yeah, and it's a huge stress on the child.
Oh yeah, and the parent too.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to, I guess, in order for your child to be successful academically, you do have to pressure your child a lot, right? You have to set the standard very high.
Yeah.
And the pressure is going to constantly be there because when you're a student, you're always a student.
Yeah.
It's not like you're at a job where you go home at 6 and then you don't have to think about work. I mean, if you own your own business, it's a different story. But I mean, in most cases, if you work a 9-to-5 job, when you go home, you do relax. But when you're a student around the clock.
Yes.
So that means that the mom, they call them these days so-called managers, right? Like a road manager for a celebrity. So there's like concert manager, road manager. But these moms have become managers where they are really like scheduling their children's day down to like every 30 minutes as to what they need to do to study academically and to do well. But I feel like, you know, it's hard to blame them. I mean, Korea, Korea is a country where there's very little natural resources, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, academics are very important.
Sure.
It's sort of like academic success is sort of like the way to, I guess, you know, change your position in a socioeconomic way, right? And so without that, they feel that life would be very difficult.
Right,
And so
right.
everyone's competing for the same thing, right?
Yeah.
In Toronto, a lot of the comparison comes from like, when did your kids start hockey, right?
Oh, okay.
Like, oh, my son started skating at 3, or like we started at 3.5. And so a lot of it's based on sports, right? But we don't really say like, oh, does your son read? Does he know how to read? Oh, does he speak Mandarin and Korean and English? But here, there's a lot of comparison.
Yeah, I mean, even with subjects, growing up in England, it was always about what subject do you like or what you're good at, and I just compared other subjects that I was good at or bad at to myself. But then, as soon as I came back to Korea, and I went to high school here, so it was, you know, a really tough time. But it was all about how good I was compared to my peers, and I had never really felt that before growing up in England. I wasn't going to school to beat everyone else. It was just to excel in whatever I was good at doing and finding my path. So I found that, and I see that with my kids and their friends, and even if it doesn't have to even go to kids' parents, but the kids themselves, I think, feel that. And sometimes I think my kids feel that too. They want to do better than other kids. I mean, I always try to tell them, it doesn't really matter if you're worse than, you know, your friend at skipping or whatever, and they'll say, no, I want to beat them, you know, I want to be better than them. And so I see that even though I teach them the opposite. So I guess it's ingrained in the society.
It is ingrained in their brains as well from a very young age that they need to be good at whatever they do.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's pros and cons to it for sure.
Yeah.
So Sue and I raised our kids completely in Korea, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Rowan went to school for a few years in Toronto and then a few years in Korea.
Right.
Any differences in terms of the attitude of the parents or even the teachers maybe?
Right. I feel like the parents, they really don't concern themselves with academics. So they're not worried if their child is not spelling it in Canada. So if they're not spelling it, that's okay. If they can't read and they're in first grade, that's okay because they will eventually get there.
Right.
And that's sort of the attitude, I think, sort of the North American attitude, right? And that is often criticized as well because a lot of it is always about, oh, you did a good job, you know, great job.
Right.
And if you don't do a good job, maybe math isn't your thing, and that's okay because you'll be good at something else, right? But there certainly needs to be a set standard and a little bit of a push because kids, I feel, perform better when there is a little bit of pressure. But if it's all the time, every day, from every adult that you know, then I think that would be unbearable.
Yeah.
So that's one of the main things I found, that parents don't concern, that they're not too worried about their children's academic development or advancement. They also don't really compare when it comes to things like that, and they wholly trust the teacher and the school system,
Right.
pretty much, which
Right.
is very important, right? You're sending your child to school, then it's up to the teacher,
Yeah.
and you give the children emotional support at home, good habits, right? And you have routines, and those are the things that families pretty much are working on at home for the child, rather than being a helicopter parent and
Right.
making sure they're doing their
Right.
homework every night and stuff
Yeah.
like that.